The graphic for the ACC matchup, bizarre. The headline, ACC head coaches who happen to be black. And they list all of the African-American head coaches in the ACC who happen to be black. Pointing this out, and Corey Alexander even admitted, but they had an intelligent conversation on the actual video watching it back, said, hey, I called a game where both coaches were black, and I didn't even think about it. It was just normal, which is what it is. But forcing this during Black History Month when, I mean, it's less about ethnicity and more about are you good at your job or not in this profession. Chad, we've said this multiple times, even in the Super Bowl matchup with Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts. We don't even think about it, but ESPN's forcing it, and even the broadcasters are saying, yeah, it's just not that big of a deal.
So I don't have a huge issue with this, and let me tell you why. We have a great production team here at OutKick that's in studio with us every day, and they do a terrific job. All sides have to help each other, right? It is truly a collaborative team effort. Your production team can make me look dumb, can make Hutton look dumb, can make Clay Travis look dumb, can make Charlie look dumb, or Dan Dockich or anyone else look dumb if there's not a level of synchronicity with graphics department along with production team. You have executive producers, you have producers, you have switchers, you have camera operators. You have all of these facets of a team to make a broadcast go and to make it coherent. And if one of those elements is just a little bit off, you get a graphic like this that is hard to explain. But is it hard to explain? Because I listened to the back and forth with Dave O'Brien and Corey Alexander, and my initial thought was Corey Alexander could have actually done a better job immediately explaining the graphic. Because here is what I'm going to guess what happened. And we may hear from someone at ESPN that tells us this is exactly what happened. Corey Alexander's point was a good one. That we're getting to a point where I don't even care what the race is because we're just getting more and more of who is the best coach. And you're seeing that with the amount of black coaches in the ACC. And that's good. It's a meritocracy, and we're not talking as much about it. So when the graphic reads, we'll show it to you one more time, but when the graphic reads ACC head coaches who happen to be black, if Corey Alexander comes on air and says, we worded the graphic this way because I see these men as basketball coaches at ACC institutions. And I don't see them necessarily as black coaches. And the ACC has done a good job of doing that throughout the years. Here's their track record. Here's where they've been progressive in a number of areas with hiring coaches, all of those things, right? I thought their discussion was good. I thought the explanation of that graphic was not good. Now, again, I'm guessing as to what happened. I think Corey Alexander or someone on the broadcast said, this is how you should label it. If that's just a random labeling job by someone in the graphics department, that's very weird.
It also felt
that makes no sense. But when I hear their discussion, Hutton, I feel like it came from either Corey or Dave, and they didn't quickly explain what the meaning was behind the graphic.
But they also did this right after they pointed out that Hubert Davis is the head coach.
Yeah. So
it came right after they showed both coaches as they were getting the game underway. Very early in the broadcast, like almost immediate. So I'm thinking to myself,
it was queued up for sure.
Yeah, that's
to me
production
that makes it
to what you're saying.
Yeah,
but who came up with the idea? I don't know.
Well, it's a production point, but if it's Corey Alexander that came up with the idea and said, label it this way, because this is going to trigger me into a conversation about not looking at the race of the coach as much as what their merit is and what they're doing, and I'll explain it when you put it on the screen. They get into a decent discussion about it, but if Corey Alexander comes on camera and immediately says, you're going to see the wording of this as ACC head coaches who happen to be black, and what we mean by that is this, boom, explanation, and talking about the history of the conference and everything else, no one's talking about it. Awful Announcing's not picking it up. OutKick's not picking it up. Right. If they do that, when there's no explanation, then it's odd because I don't even know. Hutton, usually you can look at something and say, oh, they're trying to be woke, or oh, they're trying to be provocative, or oh, they're trying to incite this group or that. I can understand the motivation of most every graphic or discussion I see. I don't even know the damn motivation of why someone would put that up there. It's so weird and oddly placed and oddly worded. Unless you listen to Corey Alexander talk about it. And that was kind of the direction he was going, but he didn't properly say it when the graphic was up to where he could have explained it better.
The quote that Alexander used was, the best thing about the entire thing, in my opinion, was the fact that you didn't even recognize the fact that it was two black coaches until I mentioned it to you. This was speaking to Dave O'Brien about a previous game that they had called.
Correct.
Earlier in the year.
And that was the broader point that he could have made right off the bat. And explain the wording behind the graphic, and we're not talking about.
Well, if that's the intent of what we saw, then I'm glad we're leaning towards this point of view instead of me automatically thinking it's Black History Month, so ESPN is forcing this somehow.
Yeah.
After they show Hubert Davis, that's the assumption I have based on the fact that ESPN continues to push this when even Dave O'Brien is admitting I didn't even think about the fact that coaches, a minority coach is coaching in a game. And we have said this countless times on HotMic and previous shows, Chad. This is not something we notice. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
We only notice it when it's
forced.
Hutton,
2 and 3 things can be true at once. It does not have to be black and white. No pun intended with what we're discussing.
Right.
It doesn't have to be this or that. It can be a number of factors that goes into this. Here are the 3 things I think that are true. I think an ESPN person said, we got to do something for Black History Month.
What do you want to do?
Hubert Davis is black, so here's what we're going to do. We've got a graphic we're going to show. You guys can talk about it. I think also Corey Alexander could have said, great, or Dave O'Brien, let's talk about how we don't even care or notice it, and then we can go into the history of the ACC. Okay, fine. Do that. Then someone in the graphics department decided to label the graphic ACC head coaches who happen to be black. And then they did a poor job explaining it off the top when that graphic appears. And what's going to happen in today's world, we're going to screenshot that graphic because it looks really dumb. No context college basketball is going to post it all over Twitter, and it's going to make no sense because it wasn't properly explained by the broadcast team. I think there are a number of failures here. I think the overall intent of Dave O'Brien and Corey Alexander was good. Their discussion was good, and I agree with everything they were saying, and I take no issue with that. Do I also think that someone at ESPN said, guys, we've got, at this day, we got 5 days left of Black History Month. We got to hit this graphic about all the black head coaches in the ACC, and now there's never been more than right now. Yeah, I think someone did that.
And on social, they were crushed. Because
I don't think it was
get the screenshot.
Based on their conversation, I don't think it was Dave O'Brien or Corey Alexander that suggested that. Based on what they had to actually say about it, right?
But yes. To me, it's just them discussing that we've had other games where this wasn't a conversation.
Again, everyone's got to function together as a team. It takes everybody to pull it off and be coherent and make a point about something without confusing people, and also not leaving yourself hanging out to dry where you got a stupid graphic up that everybody's going to talk about with no good explanation as to what the intent behind the graphic was to begin with.
Chad, there just happened to be 2 words that have been mentioned in college basketball and in college athletics that you thought would never be mentioned again. You haven't heard in quite some time.
Academic issues. The 2 words. NIL. Pay for play. NCAA versus the states of Tennessee and Virginia, which we'll talk about a little bit more soon. Coaches not being happy. There are so many issues plaguing major college sports that when I saw a headline in the Friday news dump, Friday evening, of Memphis basketball, of all programs, looking into academic issues surrounding Malcolm Dandridge, I mean, it was like I put a pencil into a light socket. My hair raised. I was shocked. Could not believe it. I didn't know that we looked at those things anymore. I honestly didn't. Every issue has been about how much can a college player at a major program make? How much should they be able to make? Are they going to hit the transfer portal? Can you keep them happy at a program? I didn't even know these kids still went to school, quite frankly. We haven't talked about that in ages.
We haven't.
When was the last time we talked about a player in a bowl game being academically eligible for the bowl game or a college football playoff? Boy, the semester's ending. Timmy's really got to do a good job on his finals or he's not going to be able to play in the Citrus Bowl.
The only time we've mentioned academics was for James Madison who would not be eligible even if it came down to APR.
Because the APR.
For a team that was 5-7.
Look, I think there's a lot of levels of college sports where getting a degree and being, keeping up with your grades, all those things matter. I'm going to tell you where it's never mattered. Memphis basketball. It's never mattered. I'm sorry if this offends some, but this is not some beacon of academic integrity over the years. I would honestly be impressed if any members of the Memphis basketball team knew where campus was at the University of Memphis, much less be academically eligible. And also, I'm going to be the first to raise my hand and say, I don't care, honestly. If you get a scholarship to a school and you don't want to utilize that to get a degree or go to class, that's on the head coach. That's on the administration. They can oversee those things. I truly don't really care about it. You know who else doesn't care? Anybody in the media, the NCAA, because they're too concerned with trying to punish Tennessee over violating a rule that didn't really exist. It was just more of a guideline, and getting their ass beat in court by a judge. They're more concerned with that than whether or not the power forward for the star basket or the star power forward for the basketball team is going to class or not. Academic issues. Who knew this was still a thing? I was shocked to read this, Hutton. I didn't know we were still concerned about that in college sports. I truly was.
The only
college
time
sports
it's
as we know it is dead.
Yeah.
There's a new era now. Whatever you thought of college sports, of kids being student athletes, that exists in a lot of places. But most of them that play at the highest level and make a ton of money, it doesn't matter.
It does
not matter.
It only matters for the excuse. The excuse of we can't expand the college football playoff because it's going to run up against the study habits of what we're getting ready to do for finals before the Christmas break. Or it's going to run over into the time that we're trying to get kids back on campus to start their classes. Guess what happened? More of the same. What they want in terms of the money and the monetary value of what the college football playoff means, the votes go that way. The other time it's mentioned is for universities like Vanderbilt, who use it as a crutch that they can't win or recruit at a high level. Now, the academics at Vanderbilt are fantastic. I'm not saying that that's just the excuse. It is for the coaches who are not having success. When they take the gig and they lean back on the fact that, well, we should have a better record. Yes, we want to compete, we want to win, but that's always been the crutch that they lean back on, despite what we've seen at Duke. And despite what we've seen Wake Forest do with Tim Duncan, for instance. We'll get to more of Wake Forest in a moment. Chad, that's the only time we hear it, and it's just for the excuse of we can't expand because we're about the student athlete, or, well, scholarship should mean more than these athletes wanting to get paid. They've been receiving that, and they still will, but it's not used as something that is of the utmost importance. If it was, then what they have used in the past of, well, they need to get back on campus at some point, or man, look at what some of the decision of some of these schools, like what Cal, for instance, coast to coast travel, for the new conference. That was used as the excuse, and then it doesn't matter. They're still going to make a ton of road trips, and so will USC and UCLA, so will Washington and Oregon, because of the almighty sports element and what that means for the university monetarily.
Well, major college sports has gone from an avenue for a lot of kids who otherwise could not maybe get a scholarship to college or afford college to get to college and get a degree. And it was a great thing for a lot of people. It's gone from that to me to, okay, now here's my route not to make a degree or earn a degree from a college. How much money can I make in the short time I have in major college sports? And how much can I bank doing that? And then do I have a future in pro sports? And far less about, am I going to get a degree? What's my GPA? What's my major going to be? All of those things. And I also think that the machine that is major college sports has just become so good at churning out whatever they need to for players to be eligible, to not be an issue, to all those things, class schedule, everything, that it's it's remarkably easy now when it comes from a school perspective. Again, this is not a blanket truth or universal. Someone's going to tweet me and say, oh, well, what about this kid? And what about this kid? Of course, there are exceptions. And, of course, there are programs that have a lot of guys who are very much into their academics and getting multiple degrees and all those things. That certainly exists.
And that's great.
My point is, broad strokes, academics don't matter in every discussion we have about major college football and major college basketball. It's all about what can the players make, what should they make, what can the NCAA do, what can they not do. And living in this state, I've never seen Memphis basketball or Memphis State basketball in the past be some bastion of academic excellence with a bunch of kids deciding to go play there, deciding to go play for Penny Hardaway for academic reasons. They're going there to play in a basketball city for a basketball school and hopefully win a lot and win some NCAA tournament games and play for a basketball legend in Penny Hardaway.
And get to the league.
And this is why I was shocked to see the headline that Memphis was self-imposing academic issues and suspensions on Malcolm Dandridge, who, by the way, is from Memphis East High School and played high school ball
the last
for Penny
one
Hardaway.
remaining from that
He is.
crop?
He came in 2019, and he's still around. He's in his 5th and final year.
The other thing, Chad, is the academic element of if you're the one and done, right? No one mentions this as a part of the no issue with the one and done because they're not going to class spring semester. They don't even have to go to class fall, because they're going to be playing in both, and there's no reason to want to come back to the roster if you think you're done.
Yeah.
But they're enrolled, and that's never been an issue for college or the NBA.
Well, and just it's amazing to me how all of a sudden, that was an issue immediately with Calipari. Guys that were going to be one and done, okay, we got to keep them in school so we don't take the APR hit. Well, now guys are coming back more and more often.
Now they are, yes.
Right. Duke's probably the bad example academically, but Kyle Filipowski, Tyrese Proctor could have gone and been first rounders likely. They come back. They're making money in NIL, but there's no discussion about, oh, well, did these guys, are they academically eligible to come back, even if they're making a ton of money in NIL to come back? I've not heard a single question about academic issues in 2 years.
Think about
3 years since NIL became a thing.
You're right. Think about our conversation with Orlando Brown Jr. and why he ended up at Oklahoma instead of Tennessee.
Yeah, because he didn't give a bleep about school in high school after his dad died.
Yeah, and he had plenty of issues to have poor grades and poor test results. And based on his GPA and his enrollment status, no one really asked the question until after he was headed to play for Tennessee. And then there was an issue, and there was still a university on the same plane with the Vols that absolutely said, come on.
Oklahoma said, no problems here.
And you followed up with, how did Oklahoma? He just kind of laughed it off.
I have no idea. I guess Oklahoma decided it was okay.
And I would say he's also one of the exceptions we're talking about, where you do make an exception for those things.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't.
But you're right. No one's really talking about it because it was never important. It was just used as a talking point that was hollow.
It's not mandatory, right? There are programs and coaches like, hey, you got to go to class, you got to sit in the first 3 rows, you got to get your degree, you got to do this and that. That does still exist, but it's so much smaller now. And it's the academic side of it to me is just no longer mandatory. I mean, the old adage that these kids didn't come here to play school is true. I mean, they are, for all intents and purposes, they are adjunct adjacent employees of the university to go win in football or basketball when you're talking about the major conference teams that are competing at the highest level. And we're not asking a ton of questions about how their APR is or how they're doing in school or any of that. And I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm not going to applaud that. I'm just telling you the reality of it. How often do you hear about academics anymore with major college sports programs?
So, can I also just try to read between the lines? What did Penny say about this? And all he said was, we'll find out as soon as you guys do, which is false. And if we rewind to last week, we were discussing Penny Hardaway and what he was saying about his team, about how it's just been an about-face and a 180 from the team that was good to the team that's been bad and what's going on behind the scenes there. Again, this is peculiar. Number one, Chad, because we don't hear it ever. And number two, because it's Memphis, and Penny normally gets his way. And this is someone that he's coached since high school.
Let me give you my little conspiracy theory on all this,
Yes.
that the university is doing this as a way to get out of the Penny Hardaway contract and to fire him because they are under probation for playing James Wiseman when he was ineligible.
Right.
They got a year left in that probation, so they could turn this over and say, we've been playing a guy who's academically ineligible, and the NCAA actually still might have some teeth when it comes to things like this because they were already under probation. And this may give Memphis the excuse and the out they need to get rid of a Memphis legend in Penny Hardaway.
Maybe.
That was not my first thought, but my second or third thought was, boy, oh boy, if it's actually University of Memphis who suddenly cares about academics and their athletic programs, I think maybe Penny Hardaway's in trouble.
Or it's just a blatant.
Then they go out and beat FAU yesterday.
Instead of poor grades, it could be a blatant cheating deal as well.
Could be.
Where it's just too obvious that's happening on campus. Like, it doesn't have to be just results on a piece of paper here. Chad, another thing that we don't hear much, we hear it a ton in college football, but it doesn't seem to be that important across the rest of the athletic programs from every talking head out there. Anytime someone is storming the field in college football now, all you hear is the chatter of, well, if you're the road team, home team, whatever, and it's like, well, if you're the road team winning, it's worth $250,000 or whatever the fine is for storming the field. And if you're the home team, you're thinking, where are these rules? I thought we banned this.
Yeah.
It happens over the weekend for Duke as they lose and Wake Forest celebrates the joy and the pageantry of college basketball, college football, college athletics, storming the court, storming the field. And unfortunately, in the midst of this, Kyle Filipowski gets hurt. And there is a mass of humanity on the court as they win 83-79, Wake does. And immediately, the reaction is, we've got to ban this. We have to ban court storming in college basketball because there is no rule or a fine in place for this currently.
In the ACC.
In the ACC.
Right.
So the SEC...
SEC is $100,000 for a first offense, $250 for the next.
$250, and just case in point, Tennessee and Alabama, the Vols beat the Tide,
and they paid
$100,000,
or maybe more.
It was more. And what did the chancellor say at the time, or the president? Excuse me. Totally worth it because it is. It's fun because by and large you don't see things like this. I didn't initially see this play out and think it was an intentional issue. You did have the Caitlin Clark thing from a couple of weeks ago. Now you have this. And unfortunately, Filipowski gets hurt. I see this, Chad, and I think, does there need to be a penalty? Sure. Is there anything you can do to stop this? If I'm in the crowd and I'm a college student and I'm thinking, man, our university's about to get fined $100,000. I'm not going to do this.
Well, the only way to stop it, if you really wanted to say this is banned, is if so many people storm the court or the field, the game is forfeited. You were going to cost your team the game.
That's the only way to do it.
We will give the game to Duke or whoever. If you do it, that's the one thing that would probably stop the fans. There's still maybe some drunken idiot that does it, but I think most fans would say, yeah, I'm not going to cost my team the game.
Now, in college football, it's extremely detrimental.
Yeah.
Because
to Wake Forest, it would have been, they're a bubble team.
Well, sure.
Imagine that game going against them. Then now they're in the NIT, not the NCAA tournament.
But at what point do you say, okay, this is officially storming the court? Is it a certain percentage of?
Yeah, it would have to be a certain amount of people.
But that's why. And if an incident still happens, you still can't stop this, where a student runs into a player. Now, do I think something should be done? I'm not against what they're saying. I just don't see any way you can stop this from happening, given the status of certain programs. And this is only going to occur for certain programs, or should occur for certain programs. And Duke's one of those brands. They are one of those, and they're going to be on the top of the mountain because it's
Duke
the Blue
and
Devils.
Kentucky has this happen more often than other programs.
But
for obvious reasons.
If it happens against North Carolina beating Duke in Coach K's final game, like that, you're not stopping that with guys making $17 an hour standing at the corner of the corridor trying to keep some drunk from running down. And
unfortunately
going to the
for
locker
Coach K,
room.
that game happened at Cameron Indoor,
right?
So there was no court storming.
Yeah, that's right. But
when North Carolina won.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like it's
Look, I think that
it's something that you can't control, even if you want to.
Yeah, it's dangerous. Let me start here. It's more dangerous on a basketball court. It's a tighter space. It's a hard surface. There are harder surface right next to it. There are chairs. There are metal benches. Depending on the venue, there's a lot of things where it is more dangerous in basketball, and you're so much more confined and in a tight spot. You're in a phone booth compared to a football field.
You are.
I think mostly football field stormings. I mean, I was down the field when A&M stormed the field. I never felt in danger. When A&M beat Alabama a couple years ago and never felt in danger. In Knoxville, it happens, and apparently Jermaine Burton felt in danger of a 120-pound co-ed and slapped her as she was walking out the field. And then that prompts Nick Saban to go on a big diatribe about how we got to ban field storming and all of this. I am somewhat sympathetic that if you are a coach or you are a player, this sucks.
Yes.
To be in the middle of it, and when you see something like that happen, I do not blame John Shire for going ballistic and going to protect his guy and the other players doing that, all those things.
Yes.
I'm sympathetic to that.
Same.
I also, if Kyle Filipowski does not play in the next game, I'm going to be shocked. I think we got a little bit of drama going on here with the fall, with his arm extension, with everything else. And I think it's very convenient to talk about a star player being injured in this melee. I'll be the first to raise my hand and say I'm dead wrong if he sits out this next game or he looks like he's not even close to 100% in this game. My guess is Kyle Filipowski is going to play the next game and he's going to look 100% because I really don't think he's truly injured based on this. Now, if you're John Shire or any other coach that wants this out of the game, and you want a way to make it out of the game, your star player gets injured like this in this incident, and people are going to get tougher about it. They're going to get more serious about it. And I think he's actually hurt? No.
Benefits Duke because it's going to happen to Duke more often. Now, the taunting, quote-unquote, aspect of this has also been pointed out, that they believe, and Filipowski does too, that it was there was intent and there was taunting. Check out. So keep in mind, you want to watch the fan as the knees hit or whatever here, and he turns around on the way he's running by him. We don't know what he says, but he turns around and is way by him. And then by that time, the other students or whoever is running behind this person that collides right there with the white hat. They then can
see.
Here's the slow-mo. He sees him.
Filipowski hits the first guy.
So
let's be clear on that.
Now watch. Now as others begin to shove him as they see the Duke player in front.
The guy behind him shoves him.
Yes. So I'm thinking taunting. I don't see it. But then you have the trainer or one of the staff members come in and grab him. I'm sympathetic to the fact that it's going to happen to players of certain programs. And we see, and I said this last week, the fights that we had, like, who was it? It was Texas Southern A&M or something?
It was Texas A&M, Corpus Christi, and Incarnate Word.
Okay, or Commerce.
Texas A&M, Commerce.
And you have a fight in the handshake line. And I said, I'm surprised this doesn't happen more often because in the heat of the moment, you have to keep your cool, even if you don't really respect whoever you're about to.
Filipowski, but he doesn't do anything bad.
No, but I'm thinking
walking
just in general.
The court, but he does give a forearm shiver trying to get the guy who's sprinting in front of him away from him. He's not trying to hurt him. He's trying to get him out of the way. There is a kid that comes behind him and yells something at him from behind, and he kind of pushes him in the back. And that's when all hell breaks loose because Filipowski starts to fall. Again, is he being dramatic with the fall? Is he not? I think he's being a little dramatic. He starts to fall. Guys are running around him. That's when Shire comes over to his defense. The other bench player comes over to his defense. They're going crazy. I would be pissed if I were the Duke team and I'm Filipowski. This is all understandable. Do I believe this was some crime that happened where he was mangled in this process and he's injured and he's going to miss the next game? If he misses the next game, I will apologize for saying this, but I don't think he's going to miss the next game. I think he's fine.
There's an element to this, though, where I'm surprised more doesn't happen in this regard. How often?
I won't apologize.
Go ahead. There's always
Never
one
apologize.
player. There's always a player or two at any level, football, basketball, whatever, they turn around and they will talk crap to the students who are talking junk to them, even in warm-ups, right?
Yeah.
And if you're storming the court, who knows what fan is going to be running at whoever in that moment if they're on the court at the end of a game that's 83-79. I'm surprised more doesn't happen from the player's perspective where you're expected to keep your cool and just get off the floor instead of respond in any way to any aspect that has been playing out leading up to that specific moment, because you're only going to be judged on that moment. And that goes for any player, coach, assistant, whatever, sideline reporter that you may be chirping to from the stands. It hasn't happened, and I don't want it to. I'm just surprised it hasn't happened to that level one time in any incident that we've seen here.
If you were one of these dudes in the black and gold striped overalls that stormed the court for Wake Forest, looking at these guys physically, and you go up to Kyle Filipowski or some Duke basketball player and yell something in their face, you are a moron.
This isn't just
for
that,
doing
though.
that. And if something happens after that, then we're going to have a bigger discussion, because if someone is in the right state of mind and they rear back and pop one of these students in the face and knock them out cold, and then other guys jump in, it's going to be a huge national issue. This is a big story because of what John Shire said afterward, and now it sparked the debate about whether or not we should ban court storming. The only way, to your first point, Hutton, about banning court storming is to tell everyone in the arena, if you step foot on the court to celebrate, you are going to forfeit this game for Wake Forest or forfeit this game for the home team. That's the only way to cut it out. That's awfully punitive. And if I'm a player on Wake Forest team and you won that game outright fair and square, and to think that that could happen because 40 drunk frat kids decide to take the court, let's say,
right,
and that's going to cost them the game and possibly the NCAA tournament, that's a lot.
But think about
But if you're serious about it and you want to stop it, that's what you got to do.
From the ACC's perspective,
they need to have a fine for it at the very least. That's ridiculous.
But at the ACC's perspective, do they want to have that chance of suffering a loss to a program that's on the bubble? Because look at how many teams they're going to get in this year. But you see what I'm saying?
No, of course they don't. But my point
is,
if you're truly serious about it, if you're going to listen to John Shire, and he's like, I am concerned with the safety of my team and my guys. I'm concerned about my guys. And he rightfully so. That should be his concern. If you're serious about it, then that's what you got to do. And the ACC is not going to do that. But if that's what the coaches want, they're supposed to listen to their coaches and administration. So show the balls to do it and say, Wake Forest, from here on out, you do it again, you forfeit the game, Duke wins.
I just think it's we're going to get to the responses here.
How do you handle that with the NCAA selection committee, by the way? They saw the game, right? I mean, like that just goes in the Duke net ranking for the win on the road at Wake Forest.
They just treat it.
And you just act like, okay, now it's a loss for Wake Forest. Is it a 1-point loss? They lose 1-0 by forfeit? How does that go to their metrics? Does the game go away? Do we do Ken Palm adjusted offense and defense for the game?
What would have
does all that get erased too?
What would have happened if Tony Petitti suspended Harbaugh for one more game than what he did?
I got so many questions about this.
Would the College Football Playoff Committee still let them in?
Yeah,
and have them ranked?
There's no fine for a school that's going to stop kids from being kids and storming the court. No. But if you make a bunch of announcements about you're going to forfeit the game and everyone knows it, that would probably stop it.
You've got your coach who has a $46 million buyout in football, but you're going to be your university's going to be fined $250.
They don't care. That's
nor should they for that amount.
And I'll
two
also
students
say,
are worth $250 to them.
If you really want to, I mean, this is not. We don't need a DNA sample to get to the bottom of this. Like they're on camera. Wake Forest knows by their student pass that got them in the game.
Right.
You can screenshot the kids that hit Filipowski or the guy who yells something at him, and you can discipline them if you want. This is not going to be as difficult as the Central Michigan investigation into who gave Connor Stallions the pass.
We're still waiting.
We still don't have an answer to
February
that.
26th, we're still waiting.
This is not that hard to figure out if you really want to do something.
Right. Well, John Shire said...
But do you think Kyle Filipowski is going to miss the next game with an injury?
When I saw this, I thought, you know how you can... you've done this if you play basketball. You can hit your knee on someone else's knee, and it goes numb.
Yeah.
And you have that tingly feeling all up and down your leg. And it is, I mean, it's a weird... It hurts, but it doesn't really hurt. It's just a weird, you can't... It's a sensation where you can't walk on it.
It's like hitting your funny bone, but your knee.
But it lasts longer.
Yeah.
That's what I thought when I first saw it on the first replay. Here's John Shire reacting to it.
Disappointed we lost. But look, for me, I'm more concerned about the well-being of our guys. You know, Flip sprains his ankle. When are we going to ban court storming? Like, when are we going to ban that? Like, how many times does a player have to get into something where they get punched or they get pushed or they get taunted right in their face? And it's a dangerous thing. And I don't want that to take away from the game that Wake played. Because Wake played a big-time game. Salas was as good as could be today, and hats off to them. But you look around the country, and Caitlin Clark, something happens. And now Flip, I don't know what his status is going to be. He sprains his ankle. And it's one thing, like when I played, at least it was 10 seconds in the court, you would storm the court. Now it's the buzzer doesn't even go off, and they're running on the floor. And this has happened to us a bunch this year. It's part of it. I don't want this to take away at all from Wake. They earned it. They deserve the win. Steve is a hell of a coach. I respect the heck out of him and his team. They're really good. And if this is an example that they need to be in the tournament, what are we even talking about? So I'll answer any questions, but for me, that's hats off to them. We need to be better. We need to learn from this. But that needs to stop.
So he mentioned whenever he played, there were students and whoever else running onto the court with 10 seconds left. Coach K couldn't even get a fine put out there on behalf of that.
Yeah, I thought everything, he handled himself very well.
Yeah.
I thought Shire was great. In that whole address, I thought he was great about not taking away from Wake Forest and doubled down on that. He's not making excuses. That was as good of an argument against court storming as I've ever heard any one coach make. So that was very well said and very well done by him.
And he's at a program where it's going to happen to him again.
I just think no league wants to do the one necessary thing to make this no longer a thing, and that is immediate forfeit for the home team if there is multiple people storming the court or storming the football field to celebrate. I just don't think they're going to go to that.
And I don't think you could get rid of it unless you do that. That's the
only way.
The only way. You can talk all you want about that. Here's Filipowski discussing what happened to him. He's post-game.
I felt a bunch of hits on my body. This one was the worst of them. So it's just, like I said, it's just really ridiculous of how, that situation's handled.
Did you feel like any of it was on purpose, or was it incidental?
I mean,
punch, did you feel?
I've already heard that there's some videos of getting punched in the back, and so I absolutely feel like it was personal, intentional for sure. Like I said, there's no reason where they see a big guy like me trying to work my way up the court and they can't just work around me. There's no excuse for that.
So, yeah, I mean, the forearm to his back is intentional. How to work around him, I mean, if you're looking straight ahead to the pile that's at mid-court or at the other end of the floor, and you're sprinting like these guys are, and the entire, it looks like the Battle of the Bastards on Game of Thrones.
Taking on all comers.
Yes.
Shire said he sprained his ankle, so he gave that was that's the injury that he gave. I didn't see that on it. Big Red sends in on Twitter to the show, watching online, outkick.com/watch is where you can watch us. The way to do it is start finding these schools millions of dollars and hire extra security. When Duke comes to town, it always increases attendance. Can't make the home team forfeit, because what would stop Duke fans from rushing the court at Wake Forest in gear and making Duke win versus Duke losing?
Well, the whole security thing is a difficult point to make, because they're outsourcing that security crew, and it's on that company to pay their employees, and they're getting, I mean, a McDonald's worker is making more. I mean, they are.
I think.
And a lot of times they're doing it through a fraternity, raising money, and anything that they earn goes back to their philanthropy.
Well, and look, what he's saying is we need all the money in college sports, then hire better security and pay more for it. And whatever.
It's going to break the NCAA, Chad.
To think that, it's going to break Wake Forest, apparently. To think that there's going to be Duke students or fans infiltrating arenas in opposing teams' gear simply to be on a mission to storm the court if Duke loses, to forfeit the game in favor of Duke. There's so many ways to find out that those are not Wake Forest fans doing it. If 8 guys did that, you could go to their social media. You could look at their ID. You could find out. No, let's not get that in depth with it. That's not going to be a thing ever.
Chad, I'm with you on it. Coming up, Trey Wallace, we'll have him weigh in. Also, there's a former athletic director for Tennessee who weighed in. He's now the AD at Wake Forest. And there's one guy really that I wouldn't want to see after a big incident on campus involving athletics or in a coaching search, and it's John Curry.